Good evening and welcome in this expert meeting dedicated to studying and discussing what is going to be discussed in the next COP11 in Paris, the conference of the parties in the World Health Organization, the WHO, to be held in Geneva between November 17th and 22nd. My name is Carlo Stagnaro. I'm Research Director of Istituto Bruno Leoni, an Italian think tank, and my job tonight is to chair the discussion. Before we get into the various issues and many topics that will be covered tonight, let me first of all introduce our speakers and then leave the floor to Johann Rossi Mason, who is the actual organizer of tonight's event through Mohre, the Medical Observatory on Harm Reduction. The discussion tonight will be held by Michaela Raescu, who is a doctor in dentistry at the University Maiorescu in Bucharest. Fabio Beatrice, who is a medical doctor and the director of the scientific committee of Mohre, and Professor Konstantinos Farsalinos, who is senior researcher in cardiology at the Patras University. But before we get into the details of the discussion, let me thank Johann Rossi Mason, who is a director of Mohre, who is the organizer of tonight's event and who is hopefully going to introduce tonight's discussion. So, Johann, you have the floor. Thank you very much. And of course, let me thank all of those who are following our discussion in streaming. You're mute?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Carlo, and let me thank you, the speakers, to be here today. Thank you, everyone. Within the conference, the body of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, there is a continuous to be an atmosphere of ostracism toward harm reduction and alternative products, with a reluctance to give dignity to the new categories. The Commission and the European Parliament, too, seem to agree on the fight against smoking, but not on the means. The Parliament is in fact oriented towards supporting risk reduction, towards the scientific approach that speaks of less harmful smoking. One wonders why the European Commission is so reluctant to put smokers and people at the center and who benefits from this hostility. And the European Commission persists in ignoring best practice, such as helping heavy smokers. The reduction in smoker-related death in Japan, in New Zealand, in Sweden, which has reached 5% with a 41% decrease in cancer rate, thanks to the use of alternative products. And finally, the United Kingdom, whose government encourages smokers to switch to e-cigarettes, with a decrease in the smoking rate from 17% to 12% in 5 years. So this is done through a narrative that does not take into account the numerous scientific studies in favor of it. It almost seems that the fight against tobacco is actually a fight against smokers. As a target, the intervention do not take into account the needs of long-term smokers and equate all products. So in my mind, policies need to be guided by scientific data and not by moral or ideological beliefs that are at odds with the need to protect public health, not only of no smokers, but also of people who are genuinely addicted. We cannot forget that it's an addiction. In this sense, Mohre agrees with the position of 83 other scientists who recently signed a letter addressed to the President of the European Commission in support of a directive on tobacco excise duties that only affects combustible products and not nicotine in general. So I want to thank you all, and now I give the floor to the main speakers. Enjoy your work.
Thank you very much, Johann. Yes, the big issue being debated tonight is basically the trade-off, if any, between public health and personal freedom, and also what kind of tools we have that may advance one of them without harming the other. In order to address this big issue, which is at the core of Europe's public policy and actually global public policy on smoking in particular, we will address a number of more specific issues. Therefore, I will start with Michaela Raescu, whom I thank you very much for your participation in this event and also in previous events organized by Mohre and others, who will briefly talk about the impact of oral health on overall health. Michaela, thank you very much again, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And it is true that even if you want to speak, if you want to eat, to drink, or to, let's say, smoke or use some alternatives, always the first impact is in the oral cavity. And just because I'm professor in oral dental prevention, so I was thinking that the best title is the best subject for this is about the oral cavity, because not many of us knows how important the oral cavity is for the overall health. So, as I said, the oral cavity plays an important role in body's management, so we cannot ignore it, and we have to explain that towards a holistic approach because of her impact in individual, it has a very big impact in individual quality of life. Let's think just that like all organs in our body, oral cavity lives by the reflex rules. That means that each particle in contact with mouth acts as a stimulus on the taste, tactile, and temperature receptors. All receptors are distributed over the mucous membrane of the entire oral cavity. So impulses from these receptors are transmitted along the afferent fibers of the trigeminal, facial, and glossopharyngeal nerves, that means the cranial nerves, and reaching the nerve centers. And in this way, they reflexively stimulate secretion in the salivary, gastric, and pancreatic glands, and the motor act of chewing and swallowing, for example. On the other hand, the stimulus at the oral cavity, even low-intensity one, it is capable to change the postural tonus. Meyer, Closade, and Bonnier showed a very important connection between posture and occlusion. They concluded that the palatal and lingual mucosa and also the sensorial structures from the mouth are part of the fundamental integration mechanism for spatial and visual orientation. The development of different body segments is made in steps. The first segment of our body in evolution from birth is the head. So that means that when we are born, the head is one fourth part of the whole body, and in the adult life, the head is 1/10 part of the whole body. Between the newborn and the adult life, the most important stimulus for the development of the postural growth and spinal one is involving the oral cavity. Stimulus made in the palatal side with the thumb from a small baby is the perfect beginning for the whole geometry of the adult body. These are just some important and unknown situations when the oral cavity is the leader of our life. David Kubi in Les Dents et la Vie is explaining how a suffering oral cavity may affect long-distance different organs and systems. So this is something that will explain how we can find some different lesions at the distance from the oral cavity, like neuralgia, obesity, heart condition, eye condition, cutaneous, digestive, nervosity, tumor, allergy. A permanent existing irritation as calculus is not compatible with the immune balance, and in time we can experience some neurovegetative symptoms in organs. In this situation, the oral cavity with lesions is always fighting for reflex defense. The internal changes are developing an anarchic structure, irreversible. This is the mechanism of oral cancer appearance. The smokers, without oral hygiene, full of calculus, caries, the constant irritation of periodontal tissue may lead to general disorders via lymphatic vessels. So how can we ignore the oral health? We have to pay attention to enhance the health and possible preventive methods for our social health, performance in school, in sports, and in general pathology without a specific cause. If a person stops smoking, all the nociceptive stimulus are destroyed, so they will decrease. So the organs are relaxed and the health is restored. That's why when we use alternatives, we can decrease the impact of smoking, not only for the oral health, but for the entire body. So the connection between the oral cavity stimulus and organs reaction is the relation between the vegetative nerves, that means parasympathetic, how we react when we are relaxed, and how we react when we have something aggressive coming to our body. So that's why it is a big issue to change and to try to explain to our patients why smoking is a big problem. And if we remember that, first of all, leaving the combustion means less toxicants, using the alternatives may be related with a better oral health. I just think that the oral diseases affect 3.5 billion people globally, and it is a strong and consistent association between socioeconomic status and the prevalence and severity of them. That's why we cannot expect that all countries will react in the same manner when they are trying to implement tobacco harm reduction. So tobacco harm reduction as a strategy. So if you remember, the notion of harm reduction is recognized and included within the World Health Organization's definition of tobacco control. If, let's say, while standard tobacco control measures focus on cessation, smoke-free nicotine alternatives provide a safer option for those adults unable or unwilling to quit smoking. And if we change a little bit the area, just think that the oral mucosa is always different when we examine a smoker and a non-smoker. First of all is the pigmentation that appears when we examine a smoker. And in the second, let's say in the second part, we can speak about how in what way we prevent the oral cancer, because it is very easy to examine an oral cavity until the lesions are going to the liver or to the lung. It is very easy to examine an oral cavity. And if the oral cavity is so sensitive, as I explained earlier, it is very, very necessary to perform this, let's say, preventive oncological exam in the oral cavity, especially for the smokers. And we can also evaluate the efficiency of the use of tobacco alternative in the oral health. It's quite easy, but the important thing is that only the doctors are the skilled to do it, because it's a very, let's say, a very small barrier between a normal, let's say, gingiva oral mucosa from a smoker and the appearance of some premalignant lesions when they smoke and they don't know exactly because color is only the visual effect. So the macroscopic effect of tobacco use can be, let's say, diagnosed and the oral mucosal changes only by doctors, because they can carry out the task and they can use fluorescence or illuminants, so they can make an early diagnosis. So in my opinion, why oral health is important and how we can show that the alternatives are beneficial for the oral health is, first of all, to explain to our patient all the time, as the oral health professionals, that they have this possibility to quit smoking, or to use the alternatives, to explain them which are the alternatives, and to monitor their health, their oral health during the month, and just counsel them, make some counseling for them if they decide to use this kind of alternatives. Because it is, I repeat, it is very easy to diagnose prematurely uh, any changes when they decide to use the alternative. Don't forget that the oral mucosa of a smoker is already changed. So the alternative means a need, but you cannot give to alternative all the damage that may appear, because I repeat, the oral mucosa, it is already damaged. If we think about a smoker who's smoking for at least, let's say, 10 years or 5 years, or 3 or 4 packages per day. And so that's why I think that every patient needs a personalized treatment, and every person needs to have his own experience. But the most, the most implicated person in this, it's the, in my case, the dentist, but the oral health professional. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both your precision and your punctuality. So that leaves time for a fruitful debate later on. I will move on to the next speaker, who is Fabio Beatrice. Fabio will speak about the relationship between young people and smoking, and what the science says and what the misperceptions may be. So Fabio, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlo. Good evening, everyone. My speech will focus on the issue of smoking and young people. Too often we see this topic being misused to demonize new tobacco products. Sorry, but I've not the correct slide. I don't know why, but the slide don't go on with my...
We may need some help.
Okay. In fact, new products are increasingly proving to be an important resource in the fight against smoking. They are not intended for young people, but for policies to help smokers who are resistant to quitting. They can be considered either as a transition towards cessation or as replacement for the traditional cigarette to obtain a strong reduction in combustion toxicity with benefits for the smoker's health. The innovation has been welcomed by many international qualified experts due to the evident difficulties of cessation strategies, even in compliance with the guidelines. Unfortunately, ideological positions often prevail when it comes to issue of addiction. This negatively impacts scientific debate and, above all, creates confusion among smokers. Therefore, clarity based on scientific data is needed. The failure of cessation policies in Europe, this is objectively proven by cigarette consumption data. Since the fight against smoking was on the key point in the cancer plan, the more time passes, the more evident it becomes that the results will not be achieved and people will continue to die for combustion toxicity. Cigarette consumption in Europe presents a contrasting picture, with 24% of the population smoking regularly and the highest prevalence in Central Eastern Europe, such as Bulgaria, Greece, and Croatia. In contrast, Sweden and the Netherlands have much lower smoking rates. An estimated 38.9 billion illicit cigarettes were consumed in the European Union in 2024, about 10%, with the consumption of smokeless products increasing among young people. So, highest consumption is in Bulgaria, Greece, and Croatia that have the highest rates of smoking, with over 35% in the population smoking. The lowest consumption is in Sweden. Sweden has the lowest rate in Europe, followed by Netherlands and Denmark. But the news is that the consumption of illicit cigarette, about 10%. In 2024, 38.9 billion illicit cigarettes were consumed in Europe, representing exactly 9.2% of total consumption. Alternative products as cigarettes are becoming popular among young people, increasing overall tobacco consumption. Tax increases are associated with increased consumption of illicit and non-controlled products, and fake news about nicotine use with new products is causing confusion among smokers. It's paradoxical, but due to ideological and political biases, many smokers are convinced that cigarettes are less dangerous than new products. Now we see some principal results in a European School Survey project about lifestyle in Europe in 2024. This is ESPAD. Cigarette smoking continues to be widespread among adolescents in the countries where the ESPAD surveys were conducted, here and after referred to as ESPAD countries. Overall, near 1 in 3 students has smoked cigarettes at least once in their lifetime, 32% on average. On average, 50% of ESPAD students report having smoked cigarettes for the first time at age 13 or younger. More than half of ESPAD students, 55%, believe that cigarettes are fairly or very easy to obtain. This is a very big problem. The perception is highest in Denmark, 76%, followed by Germany and Norway, 70%. The lowest percentage are found in Kosovo, 32%, and Moldova, 23%. Overall, boys are more likely than girls to perceive cigarettes as easily accessible, 61% versus 15%. The data demonstrates that smoking bans are poorly effective among young people. Young people are typically experimenters and transgressors, and only accurate and accessible information can prevent behaviors that are contrary to a healthy lifestyle, especially through family and school education. Monitoring trends, what has changed between 1995 and 2024. Between the first and last ESPAD surveys, lifetime cigarettes prevalence steadily decreased, halving from 68% to 32%. The most significant decline, 10 percentage point, occurred between 2019 and 2024. Over the 30 years of ESPAD, the decline in prevalence was greatest among young people, from 70% to 30%. The countries with the largest decreases are the Faroe Islands, Ireland, Iceland, and Sweden in Europe. The trend in consumption over the last 30 days also shows a steady decline for 33% to 18%, with almost identical trends among boys and girls. A similar trend is evident for daily smoking, which decreased for 20% to 8%. So we are generally seeing a decline in tobacco consumption, but there are differences of opinion among experts on the interpretation of this decline. On average, 44% of expat students report having used a cigarette at least once in their lifetime, with national prevalence rates ranging from 22% in Portugal to 57% in Hungary. In 13 of 37 expat countries, at least half of students have tried the cigarettes, while in only 6 countries, Portugal, Malta, Iceland, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Ireland, less than a third of students report lifetime use. Tracking trends, what has changed between 2019 and 2024. The popularity and prevalence of e-cigarettes use have increased significantly over the past decade, and most expat countries recorded an increase for 2019 and 2024. Data from 32 countries that collected data in both 2019 and 2024 show the lifetime cigarettes use increased from 41% to 43%. What happened in Great Britain? This is the count and the graphic. In 2023, a significantly higher percentage of youth who have never smoked vaped, 2.3%, than adults who have never smoked, 1.1%. Vaping among youth who have never smoked is now more similar to the adults, 1.6% among 17 years old, and 0.9% among adults in 2025. However, vaping among minors who have never smoked remains higher than in 2020. The graph shows that in Great Britain, a leading country in the fight against smoking, it is not true that the use of e-cigarettes among young people leads to the smoking on conventional cigarettes. Instead, it seems the opposite. But if you see the CDC data in USA in 2024, you see the current tobacco is really the big problem, and follow cigarettes and other current use in Scholar in 2024. In conclusion, it's not proven that e-cigarettes are a gateway to smoking among young people. The opposite is true. Where alternatives to cigarettes become more widespread, smoking declines. The countries with the most encouraging data on the fight against smoking are those that have not demonized the young new products, but have adhered to accurate, non-ideological, scientific information. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Fabio. I think you have put on the table many interesting things and many interesting facts that will be discussed later. So I will now give the floor to our last speaker today, who is Professor Konstantinos Farsalinos, who will talk about another very contentious issue in the policy discussion concerning health reduction and harm reduction in tobacco regulation. That is the use and the consequences of flavors, which many portray as a trap for kids, but many others believe may be instrumental to helping people, and particularly adults, to quit smoking and switching to less dangerous alternatives. So, Konstantinos, you have the floor. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Carlo, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm glad that I'm speaking after Fabio, because I have some data that will fully support his conclusions through scientific research, and not only through looking at population surveys and looking at population data. So I'm talking about flavors, which, as everyone understands, is a very controversial debate and a very emotional debate. And in fact, most regulators, even public health professionals, are using the emotional argument of youth being attracted to flavors as one of the arguments for applying heavy restrictions on harm reduction products, mainly electronic cigarettes, but not only electronic cigarettes. Nicotine pouches are now becoming another victim of this flavors emotional argument. So, as you very well mentioned, there is an ongoing debate about whether flavors help adults quit smoking or attract youth and then become a gateway to smoking, as Fabio also argued about it. So, since the beginning, one of the first surveys ever performed was performed by myself in 2013, where we examined in a large sample of vapors from all over the world the patterns of flavoring use, and we identified that those vapors who have managed to completely quit smoking were much more likely to use non-tobacco flavors compared to those who were dual users. So it seems that once you get rid of smoking, you are more prone, and all these were adult vapors, you get more prone to use non-tobacco flavors, so to move away from the tobacco experience in general. And that's probably a positive thing. And even at that time, we identified a pattern that we don't experience with smoking of vapors, adult vapors once again, using many different flavors on a regular basis, even on a daily basis. So switching between flavors within the same day. And this is to address a very common issue that exists not only in flavor, in e-cigarettes or in harm reduction products, but in general, the phenomenon of olfactory fatigue, when if someone is being exposed to the same flavor all the time, then the olfactory and sense and taste receptors become saturated, so they don't feel the flavoring. The product feels blanded without any flavoring. But since then, we have a large number of studies showing on a population level that non-tobacco flavors help a lot of adult smokers to quit, and non-tobacco flavors increase the odds of quitting smoking. So one of these studies was published in 2018 from the University of Maryland in the US, where the use of one non-tobacco flavor increased the odds of quitting smoking by 2.5-fold, so that's 150% higher chance. And the use of 2 or more non-tobacco flavors, so switching also between flavors, increased the odds of quitting even more by 3-fold. Another study in the US, which followed up users of electronic cigarettes, found that over 6 months at the minimum, found that the use of non-tobacco flavors, and in that case, mint flavor and mango flavor, so a fruit flavor, increased the odds of quitting smoking by 37% compared to the use of tobacco flavors. Another study from the US, again, University of Yale, the use of non-tobacco flavors more than doubled the odds of quitting smoking compared to the use of tobacco flavors, again, among adult smokers. A follow-up study of adult vapors from Penn State University in 2020, they followed up vapors over 5 years to check their patterns of flavor use. So they found that preferences shifted from tobacco and mint and menthol, who were the predominant choices at the beginning, to chocolate, candy, and sweet flavors. And I repeat, these are adult vapors, because we very frequently hear that candy and sweet flavors are only available in order to attract kids. No, adults like chocolate, they like sweets, they like sweet flavors. So there was almost a double of the use of chocolate, candy, and sweet flavors, from 16% at baseline to 29% at follow-up. And more importantly, and what I also found in one of the first surveys back in 2013, almost all of these vapors were using more than one flavor on a regular basis. So we have a polyflavor use, and only 1 in 10 reported that tobacco was their preferred flavor. So you understand that these are all studies showing that adult vapers prefer non-tobacco flavors, and in fact, non-tobacco flavors are much more effective in helping them quit smoking. And that's why in the press release of this study, the scientists reported that it's not only teens, but also adults who like electronic cigarette flavors, meaning non-tobacco flavors, mainly sweet and candy and chocolate flavors. More studies, this is from the ITC study in Australia, Canada, UK, USA, and New Zealand, where they found that using sweet flavors, it was a study among smokers, adult smokers, the use of sweet flavors increased the odds of quitting by 60% compared to the use of tobacco flavors. Several analysis and modeling studies have shown that restrictions on non-tobacco flavors may lead to increased smoking and the creation of a black market. And this has been proven to be the case, basically, because if you look at, and I'll move a bit forward, if you look at what's happening, for example, in San Francisco when flavors were banned, you will see that there was a reversal in the decreasing trend of smoking among youth. So youth smoking increased when flavor bans on e-cigarettes were implemented, while for comparison, in other districts in the US, as you can see in the line referring to other districts, it was other states in the US, the trend in decline in smoking rates continued because they didn't have any specific flavor bans and restrictions on electronic cigarettes. So you see that this trend that has been shown in modeling studies that banning flavors may increase smoking, it has already become the case in several cases in the US. It's not only San Francisco, but it shows a trend. There are some other studies who show that even among pregnant women, restriction in e-cigarette availability increases smoking among pregnant women. So we need to understand these issues with unintended effects of bad legislation. So I'm moving back to my slide. Another study from the University of Vancouver in Canada and Michigan in the United States, use of unflavored or even tobacco-flavored e-cigarettes did not help adult smokers quit smoking, but the use of mint, menthol, and other non-tobacco flavors, so fruit, candy, sweet flavors, was associated with a 70 to 90% higher odds of quitting smoking compared to the use of tobacco flavors. Again, so we have repeated studies, and in fact, there was a systematic review of e-cigarette use in adults published in 2022 in Nicotine Tobacco Research, where they found that among adult smokers, 2 are the main factors in e-cigarettes that increase the appeal for use. It is the higher nicotine concentrations and the access to variability of flavors. And of course, the authors called that abuse potential and appeal. But when you talk about current or former adult, current or former smokers, We're talking about people who you want these products to be appealing. You want these products to have a high abuse potential because you want these people to use e-cigarettes in order to quit smoking. So in reality, the authors themselves concluded, and I quote from their conclusion in the abstract, that high nicotine concentrations and the availability of a variety of flavors in e-cigarettes might facilitate complete substitution for cigarettes. And rightfully so, the authors note that all regulations should take into account their impact on smokers. This is very, very important. Even when you look at successful quitters, a recent randomized controlled trial from Switzerland, they followed up these successful quitters compared to those who had failed to quit, and they found that those who managed to successfully quit smoking with the help of e-cigarettes were twice more likely to use fruit flavors compared to those who failed to quit and became dual users. Again, adult smokers and former smokers. We've done one of the biggest surveys globally among adult US vapers, again showing that fruit and sweet, dessert, pastry, candy flavors are the most popular flavors even among adult vapers, and particularly even for those who had quit smoking. At the period of quitting smoking, again, non-tobacco flavors were the most frequent choice for these people when they were using e-cigarettes at the period of quitting smoking, and that's important. Sorry. So the question of whether flavors are appealing to youth, yes, they are appealing to youth, but in the same way as they are appealing to adults. And what is important to understand is how important is the availability of flavors itself in e-cigarette use initiation among youth. And to answer this question, I'm going to use not my own data, but data from the CDC in the US, the National Youth Tobacco Survey. And the National Youth Tobacco Survey, which is being done every year in a representative sample of middle school and high school students in the US, they ask why did those who initiated e-cigarette use, why they initiated that use. And if you see the options, flavors is only the 7th most important reason for kids to initiate e-cigarette use. The 7th, only 1 in 10, almost 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 9 children, students, middle school and high school students, only 1 in 9 report that flavors was one of the reasons for initiating smoking. And please note that in this question, adolescents were able to choose more than one answers. So the responses are not simply the most important reason. They asked for any reason, and they could choose as many as they wanted. But still, only 1 in 9 reported that flavors was the reason to initiate smoking. And as for what basically Fabio mentioned, the getaway effect, it has been largely rejected by the evidence. If you look at the smoking rates during the period of growing popularity of e-cigarettes over the last 13 years, the smoking rates have plummeted among US youth. They went in middle school students from 4.3% to 1.9%, and even more importantly, among high school kids, almost a 90% decline from 15.8% in 2011 to 1.7%. That's a 10-fold decrease. So it's 90% reduction. So basically, smoking has been eliminated among US youth. So how can anyone suggest that there is a getaway effect? The data, and that's CDC data, not my data, completely reject the getaway to smoking hypothesis. I showed the previous slide. So what's going to happen if flavors are banned? Let's see what happens I'm not going to use an example of a developing country like, for example, India, which has been in disaster. I'm going to use a rich and very well developed country in Europe where they attempted to ban flavors in e-cigarettes in 2012. So the National Smoking and Nicotine Use Survey that was done in 2024, what did they find coming out from this ban? They found a 70% increase in vaping all these years during the ban, and that 63% of all users, not only 15 to 29, but of all users, were using fruit flavors, flavors which were supposed to be banned from the 2022 ban. So it doesn't work. Let's see what's happening with youth, comparing the US, where flavors are available, where e-cigarettes are available, versus Australia, a country which has effectively banned not only flavors, e-cigarettes in general. Well, look at current vaping in the US, and yes, there was a problem in 2019, in 2020, but look what's happening today. It's only 5.9%. And look what's happening in Australia, where the products themselves are banned. We have a 10% use, so almost double the US rate among 14 to 17-year-olds, and a more than 20% use among young adults up to 24 years old. So you see that not only restricted, but even banning the product itself or making it extremely hard to find it does not work. It doesn't work in adolescents, and in fact, it prevents adult smokers from having access to a product that can literally save their life. But can flavors be banned in reality? The answer is no. And why they cannot be banned? Because they are not uniquely created for use in e-cigarettes. All the flavors in electronic cigarettes are coming from the food industry. So you can ban the labeling or the use of the flavoring for a specific product which is labeled as e-cigarette liquid, but you cannot eliminate the flavors themselves because they are used in very different industries. So in reality, no one can ban flavors, and food flavorings are going to be available, and people are going to use food flavorings to mix it with propylene glycol, glycer, and nicotine. So to conclude, and I'm finishing with this slide, non-tobacco flavors are very appealing to adults. They help adults quit smoking, and very likely they also prevent relapse to smoking, because we see that once they get rid of smoking, they try to move away from any tobacco-like experience, and that's very important. Adult smokers need appealing smoking substitutes. They need alternative products that they like. So the trend and the argument by some regulators that we need to make e-cigarettes not taste so good, it doesn't make sense. Smokers need to like these products in order to use them. And of course, not only that, but we need to create a competitive advantage for these products compared to tobacco cigarettes. And that's why we need risk proportionate regulation, as has been the norm for any type of policy. We need to understand that e-cigarettes are not a simple consumer product. It's not only about consumer choice and freedom of choice. It's also because they are used as an alternative to smoking products. So they have a strong public health prospect. It's not only about freedom of choices and consumer rights. So banning flavored vaping products is basically impossible. And if someone may attempt it, there will be several unintended consequences. So we will definitely have an uncontrolled black market using alternative flavorings used for food products. We will have no quality standards. There is a potential to use harmful products in what respect? In the respect that food flavorings are also available dissolved in vegetable oil. And while they are perfectly fine to be used in food products, they should not be inhaled. When you inhale lipid substances, you risk developing lipoid pneumonia. an autoimmune reaction to the lipid that you're inhaling. And many users trying to find food flavorings may end up having this condition. And of course, such restrictions are going to prevent smokers from quitting and even cause relapse among former smokers. And this is something that all regulations should consider. So the debate about flavorings is much broader than kids. And there are many other issues that have been shown in the scientific literature with studies that we cannot ignore. We need to take into account when making an appropriate regulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. Many data. So I hope, by the way, that you will want to share the presentation after the webinar. But before getting into, more conversational mood, let me call Johann Rossi Mason for a short comment on what we have just heard. You're mute.
Sorry. Data from Professor Farsalinos is ever very interesting. I would like to tell just that in a fast changing scenario, global institution seems like a train that it's ever running late. And and chase phenomena instead of determining them is not possible in this way. Maybe the institution must be driven from data and not follow them or ignore them like it happens now. Okay, I think that just this.
Yeah, I agree, and in fact, what you said resonates very well with the question I would like to ask to our speakers. Either to all of you or to those of you who want to pick up on this. I have read a statement by the former World Health Organization Research Director Tiki Pang, who said that several million deaths could be spared if we, accepted less harmful alternatives rather than going for a hard line of zero smoke, zero whatever, which seems both a position supported by data, as you have shown, particularly Fabio and Konstantinos, and also, logically reasonable. So my question is, why do you believe, or how do you explain that so many people, both in the health establishment and outside of it, are actually fighting for an hardline approach? Fabio, yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, I'm in line. I think that there is an ideological approach on this question, because every time that we speak about dependence, we have some people that think that is stopped every form of dependence. So also smoking, but to quit is very, very difficult. So the problem to quit is give a chance to smoking people, and the flavor, for example, is a very, very big chance. But I have because the flavor, for example, fruit flavor, is a good substitution of satisfaction from nicotine dependence. So you change nicotine dependence in flavor taste, okay? But I have a question for Konstantinos, if you permit. Why flavor fruit, for example, is better for smoking people than tobacco flavors? Because he says that flavors is better than tobacco. I think that it's possible that tobacco flavors in a cigarette is a following but different mode to smoke. If you change and stop with tobacco, also flavor of tobacco, you have a good satisfaction with taste, for example, of fruit, and this substitution is very, very important to change and stop. What do you think, Konstantinos, about this observation?
I think that, of course, a smoker who has never tried this product is much more familiar with the tobacco flavor. But the disadvantage of using tobacco flavors is that you maintain some sort of experience which is similar or resembles the smoking experience. And you know, one of the most effective ways to get rid of smoking forever is to get as far away from the smoking experience as you can. Because, you know, smoking smells and tastes horribly. But a smoker who is used to smoking every day, they get acquainted with this. So we need to move them away from the smoking taste and smell. And once they get desensitized, then, no, in fact, they get resensitized to the aversive, to the very bad smell of smoking. But for this to happen, they have to have an experience that is very far away from smoking. And this is what fruit flavors, sweet flavors provide. They provide an experience which is so different from the smoking of tobacco that once they try again to smoke, it feels horrible. It feels very bad. It feels very aversive. And I think that this is one of the reasons, because, you know, from clinical experience, we've seen that people who use alternative products, but let's say smoke 1 cigarette per day or 2 cigarettes per day, they maintain this attachment with smoking, so it becomes very hard to completely quit smoking, and eventually many of them, at some point, they relapse back to full-time smoking at the same consumption that they were doing before. So what these flavors provide to a smoker is an experience that is totally different from smoking. So it makes smoking feel and smell horrible to the smoker afterwards.
Yeah. But it's very interesting to see that if you speak with smoking people that changed in flavors and cigarettes, after 15 days about, they see that cigarettes has a bad smell, and now I have a good smell. And this is a very important change, because after you have established a change, a definitive change, is possible in the time to reduce also the consumption of nicotine. So it's really better. I think that it's better that the youth are interesting to test that smoking. I think this is better. Many father and mother ask me, my son smoke. Is possible to change for a cigarette? Yes, and they are very interesting to smell, and so this is a very, very good thing to the change in cigarettes, and then they stopped because they lose interest for cigarette if they change one time. So it's very important to have the first change to interrupt the dependence from smoking. I think so.
Yes, and answering to what to Carlos' initial question about the WHO and their stance, I agree with Fabio. It has become an anti-nicotine war instead of an anti-smoking war, and unfortunately, it's not going to work. We haven't seen any country getting rid of smoking unless they have a nicotine alternative. Sweden is a characteristic example. The rate of nicotine use in Sweden is the same as the rest of the European Union. It's 23%. The big difference between Sweden and all other countries is the source of nicotine intake. In Sweden, it's snus and pouches mostly. In the rest of Europe, it's smoking. But Sweden already has lower rates for cardiovascular disease deaths, lung cancer deaths, deaths from cancer in other organs compared to the rest of the EU that are attributed to tobacco. So they already have an effect on a population level, a benefit. Now, the WHO has been wrong in harm reduction in the past, you know. In the 80s, they were strongly opposing harm reduction for opioid users. And they're doing the same mistake with smoking today. And of course, over the years, they changed their opinion with opioid users. And now harm reduction in the form of clean needles and opioid substitution therapy is the norm. But you know what the big problem is? All over the world, there are about 15 million opiate users who are at risk and who need harm reduction. With smoking, we have 1.1 billion smokers globally and 8 million premature deaths. The number of deaths due to smoking is half the total number of opiate users. So the mistake that the WHO is doing today with smokers is costing far more lives than the mistake they did in the past with opiate users. And let's hope that the WHO will eventually and soon learn from the mistakes of the past and understand that harm reduction is something that we use every day in our lives. Wearing a seatbelt, wearing helmets, looking across the street before crossing to go to the opposite side of the road. These are harm reduction approaches. So we cannot discuss about the value of harm reduction. The value of harm reduction exists in all our lives. There is no reason why it cannot exist and why it will not work with smoking.
Yeah, I think John.
I agree.
I think that John may want to get into this, and then I will have a comment and a question for you all. John.
Yeah, okay. I would like to share an impression with other speakers. I notice that in the absence of precise information and real knowledge, doctors use a shortcut and claim that all products are the same and equally harmful. I don't know if it's my impression, but I want to ask you, do you think that a clear position from international institution, OMS and Commission can create a more effective direction of help on health for smokers?
I think that they need studied more because we have many scientific evidence in very, very important review papers. And this is a problem that if you decide by scientific data or by ideological position. Now we assist in ideological position, but I hope that with this data in the future, it's possible that we have the change. I think that it's better change if you have in all the world a total substitution of smoking in cigarettes or other consumption of nicotine is better because after a few years you see a reduction, for example, for the cancer of the lung, because in Sweden, after 5 years of substitution, we have a very important reduction in cancer of the lung from 20% to 5% in the men. No in women, because in Sweden, women don't like to have nicotine pouches or snus, and lung cancer in women in Sweden is the same of 5 years ago. So we have some very important data. It's possible to save many lives in Europe if we read very important papers and reviews, and we decide after reading this data, because they are very important. We have Lancet, we have very, very important Nature, Cochrane. It's not a problem of data. It's a problem of ideological position.
Thank you, Fabio.
I fully agree with Fabio. It's we do have the evidence, we do have the knowledge. It's the lack of knowledge among the healthcare professionals and parts of the public health community. I'm going to give you two examples. In 2016, we did a study on Greek healthcare professionals. About 80%, 85% responded that nicotine is a very important, an extremely important, very important, or important contributor of smoking-related lung cancer and cancer in other organs. The same exact position was found in a study among 1,000 US physicians, members of the American Medical Association, who said 83% fully agreed, I mean, strongly agreed with the statement, nicotine causes cancer. And let me tell you, the International Agency on Research on Cancer, which is a WHO organization, they do not list nicotine as a carcinogen. So nicotine is not a carcinogen, but doctors, physicians believe that nicotine causes cancer. It's unfair. So it's exactly what Fabio said. We do have the data. We do have the evidence. They don't know it.
We need more information also in medical organization because this is very, very big ignorance of really data. Yes, we need.
So in terms of the organizations, I'm more prone to think that it's more a problem of ideology rather than a problem of lack of understanding. And I'll give you an example. Very recently, the European Society of Cardiology sent a letter to the European Commission asking for severe restrictions or bans on e-cigarettes. Now, the same society, the European Society of Cardiology, in their official journal, the European Heart Journal, 10 months ago, in October 2024, they published a study of following up 18,000 patients with coronary artery disease, smoking patients, to check the MACE, major adverse cardiac events, so new heart attack, comparing those smokers who continue to smoke versus those who had quit smoking without using any alternative. And the third group was e-cigarette users, with only half of them having completely quit smoking. The rest, 45%, were still smoking, but lower number of cigarettes. And what they found, the study was performed in South Korea, a follow-up of up to 5 years, 2.5 years was the median follow-up period. They found that the benefit from e-cigarette use was statistically identical and numerically higher than quitting smoking without using any alternative. And it was a study published in the European Heart Journal, the official journal of the European Society of Cardiology. So I think that obviously they know what they published. It went through peer review. It was published a few months ago. So I think that in the case of big scientific bodies like European Respiratory Society, European Cardiology Society, and so on, I'm afraid that it's more a problem of ideology and not wanting people to use nicotine, which in my opinion is an ethical issue and should not be a public health issue. It's an issue of judging behaviors. And yes, we may need, some people may need some help to get rid of any kind of dependence. But this is not about public health. Public health is about disease and death. And we're not seeing disease and death from nicotine use through a cleaner source. In the same way that we're not seeing disease and death from nicotine replacement therapies. And that's why the FDA and the MHRA in the UK have approved the long-term, even lifelong use of nicotine replacement therapies if a smoker needs such products in order to stay off cigarettes.
Yeah, let me add one last point for discussion and for your opinions, and then I think our time is running off. I think one major issue in how the health community discusses tobacco smoking is that they tend to ignore the behavioral determinants of individual choices. I mean, we do every day a huge number of dangerous things. I mean, we drive cars, we drive motorbikes, we eat extra caloric food, and among the other things, we smoke. And when we do this stuff, it's because it's not that we are not aware that there are also costs, either actual or statistical costs. It is that the perceived benefit is higher than the perceived cost. Now, in the case of smoking, the problem is that when I smoke a cigarette, I get the pleasure now, and I will have my risk or my diseases many years from now. So there is a kind of disconnect. And if you just don't allow me to do things that I like, it's very likely that I will find ways to circumvent the ban. And whereas if you allow less harmful alternatives, you save my possibility and to some extent my liberty to enjoy, I mean, a gesture or an habit, good or bad, while limiting or reducing and maybe even driving too close to zero the underlying risks. So my question is, which is kind of provocative to Konstantinos and Fabio, is in your opinion, is the problem that doctors should speak less of public health and leave some more room to political scientists, economists, or other people who maybe know less about how, I mean, smoking causes cancer, but to understand more human behavior?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. First of all, I think that physicians have forgotten the definition of health, which is not about the health of the body. It's about social and it's about psychological well-being. So it's not only physical well-being. And the definition of health from the WHO in 1947 is a totality, physical, psychological, and social well-being. This is the definition of health. So physicians today, unfortunately, they tend to use the term health only to discuss about physical health, so somatic health, health of the body, not of the mind, not of the social interactions between people. Second of all, unfortunately, I might agree with you, but the reason for that is the lack of education about public health. They don't understand what public health really is. And in some cases, they don't understand what a realistic expectation of a consultation, an advice, or even an intervention is. I mean, many healthcare professionals behave as if quitting smoking is a decision that you can take and succeed in 1 minute. They don't even understand that there is another issue besides the pleasure issue that you mentioned. Nicotine has therapeutic effects, whether we like it or not. It improves concentration. It is used as self-medication by a very large group of people in the population who have either clinical or subclinical, non-diagnosed psychiatric disorders. So, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, smoking is being used as self-medication, but this is due to nicotine. the effect that they perceive is not due to smoking, it's due to nicotine. Now, imagine the risk that we are posing these people to when we tell them that no, these products are the same like smoking. So we of course suggest to them to quit everything, but these people cannot quit everything. So instead of being properly informed that in order to get this kind of self-medication, don't smoke, use an alternative, less risky nicotine product, and you'll get the same benefit. These people are basically deceived by healthcare professionals into thinking that everything is the same, but because I need nicotine for self-medication, I'm going to just continue to smoke. Can you understand? This is a crime that we're doing against these people. And still, healthcare professionals don't understand what they're doing.
Konstantinos said it all. I agree, and I stop. So
I will add something. Smoking, look like Konstantinos tell, is an answer to stress and social determinants. So it needs to remove a problem at root, not just act on nicotine addiction. So I want to say that ideology is a short-sighted approach that just only not save lives, and the number of deaths is not a problem just for families, but for countries, because it lacks workers, taxpayers, in addition to enormous healthcare cost. It's a problem for optical vision, not only ideology, and I think that smokers, it's responsible of our destiny. Is destiny is not in this way.
Thank you very much, Johann. Let me thank all of our speakers, Johann, Konstantinos, Farsalinos, sorry, Fabio, Beatrice, and Michaela, Raescu. Let me thank all of those who have been following us on streaming or who will follow us later. And let me just close with a personal thought on all of this. Smoking is one of the many unhealthy habits that we have, and one of the many unhealthy things that we do. I think it is important that institutions promote more healthy lifestyles and more healthy alternatives. But the key here is to leverage upon people's choice rather than obliging people to do things that they don't want to. Also, because we have a lot of experience, I mean, with that paternalistic approaches usually do not work. And if they do that at a cost that, as a society, we are not always willing to pay. So in a way, the situation is very simple, because we do have alternatives. We can have an opportunity to save the people's liberty and ability to engage in the behaviors they like, while protecting their individual and public health. I think this discussion of today helped to support this position, which is a personal political position, to back it with data and evidence. So I hope that this will help to frame a new and more rational approach to public health, and to reducing the number of people who die or suffer from smoking. So thank you very much.
Thank you to Carlo
for this opportunity, and see you next time.
Thank you, Carlo, for your job. Thank you very much. And follow us on the social media in more info. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.